your mother, your father, or your partner, or someone else you are close to in your life, on a party has made a statement that really upset you. It was not the first time they did this. It was something that really embarrassed you, made you feel ashamed. How could they be so inconsiderate? How could they completely ignore your own situation, your feelings? The party was spoiled for you. Your whole mood was spoiled. And you are only thinking about what to tell him or her when you have the opportunity, when you are alone. That opportunity comes when you are driving back, you are in the car, and the other person has already noticed that something was going on with you. And he or she says, well, something is wrong with you. It seems you couldn't enjoy very much the party. What's up with you? You feel how the heat comes up to your head. And while you are starting to answer, your voice is almost failing. Mama, how dare you to? And the person answers without any understanding of your situation. You're becoming more and more angry. You are making wild gestures. You are becoming loud. You are becoming offensive. You use bad words. You are insulting. You are shouting. The more you get into the discussion, the angrier you become. And you come to a point where you really don't care about any consequences of what you are saying or doing. There's an underlying systematic how anger builds up and how anger works, how it develops, and how it is released. It is important for us to understand where anger comes from, what it does, what its consequences are, and how to deal with it in a healthy way. The consequences of anger. Anger wants to discharge, it wants to unfold, it looks for an opportunity to act. And depending on the force of anger and also on our own possibilities to control anger, we might be able to more or less steer anger in a less harmful way. Or we are not able to do that at all. It could also be under other circumstances that you are able to swallow your anger in that situation toward a particular person. But then you let it out in a completely different situation towards other people who have nothing to do with the reason why you became upset in the first place. Or you swallow your anger and you never let it out, and it creates harm in yourself. The nature of anger is that it is destructive. it is very probable that you do or say something that you wouldn't do or say under normal circumstances. Your anger may destroy something that you really appreciate, that has a lot of value for you. Especially our relationships can get severely harmed by unfolding uncontrolled anger. Anger has started wars. Anger is like fire, which is very destructive, all consuming. Like everything else, anger has its utility. It's an energy, it's a force that you can use to protect yourself and others. If others are being treated unfairly, if others are getting harmed, things are going wrong, you need this extra energy to correct the situation. Anger is powerful, it is aggressive, and it requires intelligence, patience, empathy, and the proper inner attitude, maturity, to use it properly. All qualities that you can obtain on a spiritual path. If you don't have these qualities, or they are insufficiently developed, it is very probable that the energy of anger, if it is let loose and uncontrolled, does a lot of harm. Maybe damaging something that can never be repaired. Something you'll regret later when it's too late. According to psychology, anger comes from frustration. When your own goals seem to be unreachable, or when your own limits or rules are being ignored. It could come from a feeling of helplessness when you are not able to deal with a difficult situation. It could come from being humiliated, from mobbing, from misuse, or other traumatic experiences. Strong emotions that you are not able to digest. It could be the symptom of a psychological disease like depression or borderline personality disorder. It could also come from suppressed anxiety, where the root cause of an expression of anger is actually fear. Psychologists agree on that just suppressing anger is not a good solution, at least not long term. So there are many kinds of therapies for people who really have severe problems with anger, where people can learn how to deal with anger, how to release anger in a healthy, less harmful way. And in a deeper kind of therapy, you have to look for the root causes for anger. And the closer you come to the root cause, the more you get into a spiritual level. Any inner conflict, if you really want to solve it at its root, you have to come to the spiritual level, where you really get into contact with your inner nature as a soul, where you can loosen the strong attachment, the strong identification on the material platform of body and mind. If you can come to this level, the spiritual level, that gives you enormous freedom. That gives you a real opportunity to look through all your behavioral patterns, through all your psychological patterns, where you can really see things as they are. And that gives you the possibility to deal with life itself and all situations that might come up. Also very conflictive situation. You can deal with them in a relaxed, sober and empathetic manner. For example, when you are offended, what is being offended? Is it a bodily attribute, a mental quality, the belonging to a certain country or nation or religion or a certain group, a club? These are all temporary attributes. You as a soul, you are far beyond that. Of course, other people who are into their own material identifications cannot perceive you as a soul. They only perceive your external features, bodily features, mental or psychological qualities. But you, when you are on a spiritual path, you should be able to see yourself, to perceive yourself as a soul. And that is actually your real task in life, to come to the spiritual level. On the spiritual level, you will not feel affected that much by misbehavior or misunderstanding between people. So really anger is coming from frustration. The frustration of our desires. So doesn't the soul have desires? Shouldn't we have any desires? Well, in reality, the soul has desires. That is natural. But it's a different kind of desires. It's not this kind of egoistic desires where your desire might be in conflict with other people's wishes. Or people might be ignorant or callous about each other's desires. The soul has desires, but the spiritual soul feels closely connected with all other souls. On the spiritual level, your needs are not so much about your personal goals or your personal comfort. It is much more about relationships, about harmony, about living together, about exchange. A really elevated soul, really advanced spiritualist, for him or for her, the happiness of others is more important than his own happiness. Actually, the happiness of others is his happiness. Therefore, a person advanced in spiritual life hardly ever gets angry. In this connection, I would like to tell a story. I have some weeks ago already told two stories of a saint from India, Haridas Thakur. In that video, I was talking about tolerance and patience. But the same stories also apply for anger. So I'm pasting the link in the video description below if you want to see these examples. And today, in today's video, I would like to tell another story. So in ancient scriptures, you find the story of Jada Bharata about his last 3 lives. In the first life, he was a king, the king of the earth, Bharata Maharaj. In his next life, he appeared in the body of an animal, in the body of a deer, and in his last life, he appeared as Jada Bharata. Jada means dumb, stupid. Because he had a certain experience in his last lives, he had learned from these experiences, from his mistakes, he became very careful. And he was playing the role of Jada Bharata. He was playing stupid. He grew up, he was born in a very elevated, educated, respected family, and his father was raising him with a lot of love, and he was eager to make Jada Bharata also a man of his own caliber, very respected, very educated. But that attempt was a complete failure, because Jada Bharata completely blocked himself of any attempt to be educated. Whatever his father told him or showed him, he just did the opposite. And it took a long time, but finally his father had to accept that it was impossible to educate this child. So he still treated him with love, he cared for him as long as he lived, but he understood that Jada Bharata could not be taught anything. Jada Bharata didn't speak even a word in his life, and he always behaved like he was completely stupid, almost crazy. So all his family members rejected him. Of course, he had no friends, he had no social life at all. He was just living inside of his family under the care of his father. But when his father died, there was no one left to care for him. And his family rejected him. His brothers treated him roughly, they despised him, and they mistreated him. They gave him only remnants of food that no one else wanted to eat. And Jada Bharata, as always in his life, he never complained. He appeared unaffected by bad treatment. And at one point, his brothers sent him out to the field. They put him in a spot to act as a bogle, as a straw man, to scare away the birds from the field. So Jada Bharata was standing on the field in the weather, whatever weather conditions were there, day and night, 24 hours. He didn't complain, nor did he just go away. He didn't move from the place. He tolerated all bad treatment, all insults, without complaining. He just obliged with what people wanted him to do. That was a certain strategy, a tactics that he had, because he didn't want to get, for a certain reason, into relationships with people. He was a very elevated, advanced saint, a very advanced spiritualist who just wanted to be alone, undisturbed, to connect with his inner nature. He was always in a meditative state. He was always meditating inside of himself. So after standing on this field for many weeks and months. It so happened that one day there was a group of burglars coming, and they needed a man that was, as they perceived it, half animal, really a dumb person. So they saw Jadabharata and they thought, this is a perfect victim for us. We will sacrifice him in front of our goddess. This group of burglars, they were worshipping a goddess named Kali. And as they thought, Kali took pleasure in sacrifices of humans. Of course, no developed human could be sacrificed in front of the goddess, but they thought it was okay and it was a pleasure for the goddess if they could offer a human that was almost like an animal. So they took Jadabharata with them and they washed him, they purified him, they cleaned him very properly, preparing him for the offering to the goddess. They decorated him, they fed him delicious, sumptuous meals just in preparation for the sacrifice they were planning to do. And Jadabharata, although externally he appeared to be so dull, so stupid, but internally he knew exactly what was going on. He understood exactly what they were planning to do. But again, as always in his life, he did not mind. He didn't protest. He was not scared to die because he knew as a soul he would never die. It would just be another change of body. So in front of the goddess, of a deity of the goddess, a statue, there was a priest guiding the ceremony. There were all other kind of helpers. And one guy who, with an axe, he prepared to cut off Jadabharata's head in front of the goddess. So, according to mythology, Indian mythology, a real deity, although he or she may be made of stone or metal or wood or whatever material, but if it's a real deity, the god, the personality or the goddess in this case, is present inside and accepts whatever prayers, whatever offerings you give to her or him. So this was an authentic deity, and goddess Kali was actually present in the statue. Now a statue is not moving, not showing any expressions. They are not externally visible exchanges. But the goddess was actually present in the deity, and she was witnessing what was going to happen. And she knew that Jadabharata was not actually a dumb person. In reality, she didn't want to have any human sacrifices or even animal sacrifices. It's just something that the goddess tolerates in most cases. But in this case, she could see that Jadabharata was a very elevated person, that they were going to commit a great crime on him, that he was a very empathetic, loving person who would never harm any creature. So before Jadabharata could be killed by these bandits, by these rogues, she came out of the deity, she came out of the statue and took the axe out of the hand of the offender and killed all the criminals around. She created a great massacre just to save Jadabharata. So Jadabharata, as usually, was not affected by whatever was going on around him. He was in deep meditation, in connected to his soul. He felt sorry what happened to the criminals. He was sorry what happened to his offenders. But he already felt sorry before they were all killed by the goddess. So, but he couldn't do anything about the situation. So after the whole scene was over, he just left the place and started wandering around. He had lost his home, nor was he interested in returning back to his home, to his family. He was free now, so he started walking and walking and walking. He continued walking around again for a long time before another group of people in need of someone like him, what they thought was him, met him and took him with them. In this case, it was a group of servants of the king. The king of the whole country was visiting this part of the country, and he was being carried in a palanquin. For that, 4 strong men was needed. But it so happened that one of the guys who was carrying the palanquin became ill and he couldn't continue. So the other 3 were on a search for someone strong enough who could do the job. And they found Jadabharata. So they took him with them. And as always, Jadabharata didn't complain. He just complied with what other people wanted from him. So together with the other 3, he took up the palanquin and helped carrying the king along his way. But already after a few meters, it became obvious that Jadabharata was not the right person for that job. He couldn't follow the rhythm of the other 3 carriers, and that created a great inconvenience for the king, because the palanquin was shaken all the way and he couldn't remain peaceful. So the other 3 carriers became already a little afraid, and they tried to show Jadabharata how to carry the palanquin properly. But Jadabharata was not able to follow their advice. So the king started complaining. What's going on here? What's happening to you? Have you forgotten how to carry a palanquin? The 3 carriers immediately answered the king in a fearful mood. They said, No, it is not us. It is a new guy. Somehow he is not able to do his job properly. So the king addressed Jadabharata personally and told him, well, you are new, but just follow the way the three other carriers are doing their job, and you will learn quickly how to do it. Better learn it now. So they again picked up the palanquin and followed on their path. But Jadabharata was still unable to follow the rhythm. That had his reason in the nature of this saint. He couldn't trample the ground like the others, but he was always looking in front of him on the floor if there were any animals on the floor, any insects, if there were some wandering ants who crossed his way, and he didn't want to harm, he didn't want to kill even an insignificant ant. So he had his own way of walking over the ground, which was completely incompatible with the other carriers. Now the king became really annoyed with all of this. He couldn't sit peacefully in his palanquin, and it was all the fault of this Jadabharata. So he addressed him with really harsh words. What are you doing? You don't know who I am? If you don't learn how to do your job properly, I will punish you. And this will be the way you learn how to behave. Hearing this insult, Jadabharata opened his mouth for the first time in his life to speak. And as we will see, it was not because of the offense, because he felt insulted, but it was for the benefit of the king. The king, in reality, he was in the illusion that he is a great king and everyone else was meant to serve him. But in reality, inside of him, he was a spiritually quite advanced person. Still, he was in this bodily illusion. So Jadabharata, he knew that. He knew there was a special person. He didn't address a king because he was a king. He spoke to him because he knew that soul in the body of a king can understand what I'm going to tell him. So Jadabharata answered, and he told the king, you think you are the king, and I'm your servant. But maybe in the next life, I will be the king, and you are the servant. You are just in an illusion. Your ego is inflated by your position, and you are completely in the bodily illusion. When the king heard this, because he was a spiritually advanced person, he could immediately appreciate these words. And instead of becoming angry and feeling offended, he understood that must be a great saint I'm talking to. He looks like a fool. He behaves almost like an animal. He looks like an animal. But we are all underestimating his real position. He is a far advanced spiritual personality. And he immediately got out of his palanquin and fell flat on the ground before Jadabharata to offer his obeisances, to ask for forgiveness. And after that, he immediately begged Jadabharata for a conversation. He had many questions on his spiritual path, and he wanted to use this valuable moment, this valuable association with such a great saint, with such an advanced person, to benefit himself, to have his questions answered, to elevate his consciousness through the association of Jadabharata. Now a whole very interesting conversation developed from the questions of the king, which I'm not going to narrate in this video. What I'm Why I'm telling this story was just to give an example of a highly advanced spiritualist and their full detachment from the illusion of their bodily, mental, and psychological situation. A person who's really advanced on the spiritual path, for him or her, bodily or mental, psychological pains are greatly reduced so that they almost can't feel them. But what they feel is all their environment, their connectiveness to existence. They feel the pains of others more than their own pains. Of course, we cannot imitate the behavior of such elevated persons like Jadabharata or Jesus Christ or other people who show us examples, extreme examples of behaviors in challenging situations. But these people serve us or as an inspiration to continue to go deeper on our own spiritual path. And while you are progressing on your spiritual path, even you haven't come to that level or not even close to that level, you will start feeling your connection with your inner nature. And as you continue on your spiritual path, there you will also feel less suffering, less pain, be it psychological pain, mental pain, or even physical pain. Our bodies and minds are always subjective to disturbance, to pain. These are very fragile instruments that can be the cause of great suffering for the soul, as long as the soul is fully identified with them. But as you reduce your identification with them, your identification, your feeling of these disturbances will also be less. And also in the case of anger, you can see clearly the root causes of anger. You can see all your behavioral pattern of not only anger, but all kinds of disturbances you might feel. You can really look through these patterns, and that will help you a lot to not immediately or necessarily to react on challenges. The release of anger might give you some relief, some satisfaction in the moment you are releasing it. But more often than not, it will create a damage that you later regret. Now, anger is also, I mentioned it before, is of some utility. And one good use that you can give anger as a spiritual person, or as you can see it, is to remind you, to inspire you to go deeper on your spiritual path. And it also serves as a possibility, a tool, where you can see if you are really making progress on your spiritual path, or if you might have to change something. Take care.